Hey there, this is Joe Meadows, and in this video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the administrative health and safety settings for OpsLock. So these are things that somebody who is an advanced user, probably somebody who has administrative or managerial health and safety responsibilities is going to be taking care of, and they're the global settings for the entire company. So the place we're going to go to learn about these is here in settings on our company page. So we click on our company page and we come down here to settings. And here we can see that we have a number of options for some of the different features. Some are very simple, some are more complicated. So we're just going to work through them top to bottom and provide a little bit of context so that you've got confidence on how to move things forward. So let's start with investigations. This one's pretty simple. Basically, what this allows you to do is to enable an additional field on your investigations that allows you to indicate if you have who your customer was that you were working for when this incident took place. So that's an optional setting. Just allows you to enable or disable that field, based on your requirements. For certain companies, you really need to indicate that you were working for company X on that investigation report so you can share it with them, and that's clearly documented, whereas for other companies this is less appropriate. So that's that setting. Let's go back. Isolations, again, very simple one. If you watch the isolation video, you know that one of the features that we offer is the ability to log what we would call an unplanned isolation. So that's if somebody needs to isolate something and there's not an existing isolation plan for that piece of equipment or system, they can simply kind of lock in each step as they go through. And by doing so, they'll create a record that can be improved on in the future. What you can do here is require that if they're doing that they take a photo to verify the installation of each lock they've installed for that isolation. So what this requires is that you're operating in an environment where people are using a mobile device on a regular basis. If mobile devices are not something that people are carrying and that are available where these locks are being installed, we would encourage you to make this not required. It'll still allow them to add a photo if they can, but it won't block them from logging the isolation unless there's a photo. So that's how that setting works. Observations, again, quite simple. Here, what we allow you to do is enable the ability to submit observations anonymously. For certain companies, they want to encourage a culture of accountability and make sure that people are standing behind the feedback that they share. So you can disable this if you'd like to. Additionally, if you want to make sure that people feel safe, maybe communicating things that are a little bit touchier, and that they won't have any fear of reprisal, you can enable them to submit observations anonymously. It'll still default to come from them, but if they remove their name, then you won't be able to tell who submitted that observation. Okay, now work permits. Those are all the simple ones. Work permits are where things get complicated, so let's dive into it. In our work permits, we have a number of settings. So here, again, I'm just going to work from top to bottom. I'll explain what each field means, and hopefully this is helpful for you. So default permit signatories. What we're going to see on this page is who are the roles, and again, our roles are custom for your company, so these are just examples here. What are the roles that can sign the 3 levels of signature on our permits? So to reiterate, the issuing signature, that's the final level of the person who is ultimately issuing the permit. The supervising signature, that's the middle level. So this is the person who's responsible for overseeing the specific job that's taking place, making sure that that job's taking place safely, but they're probably not actually performing the work. And performing signature, that's who are the people who are actually doing these jobs, who need to sign the permit to indicate that they understand it, etc. So often, performing is that largest list where we want anybody to be able to indicate that they've read and accept the permit before they perform some work. So that's what we're seeing here for default permit signatories, all those various roles. And And on the permissions for those roles is where we would edit what appears in this list. For signature process, signature validity, you can see here that this is actually incorrect. Or 0 hours is not something we would see normally. But signature validity shows us how long is a signature valid when somebody signs a permit. So typically we would encourage that this be about 12 hours or 8 hours depending on the shift length. But that's typically what you see is it's a signature is valid for kind of the average length of a working shift. What this means is that when this number of hours is reached after somebody has signed a permit, their signature will become invalidated and the permit will become suspended. They can sign it again if they so choose to keep that permit active, or they can also sign it the next day if you're still within the permit validity period. But this is the maximum time that any one signature can be valid before the permit needs to be re-signed. So that's our default permit signatories page. Permit validity, which I just alluded to, that's how long can our work permits live before they need to be either recreated or closed. So right now, this company has it set to 7 days. That means that within that 7-day period, those signatures are going to expire every 12 hours. So people need to sign the permit again. It's not that it's just you sign the permit and it's good forever. But this basically allows or gives employees a little bit more flexibility if they have a job that's more complex, that we don't see it bringing any value to simply having them recreate a permit over and over again with all the same information. So if none of the circumstances of the permit have changed, they can continue to re-sign the same permit for a maximum of whatever you enter in this field. Okay, working our way down, permits requiring a rescue plan. So in OpsLock, we give you the ability to automatically attach rescue plans that are housed in our library. This basically indicates what are the types of permit that you've created that are going to require someone to add a rescue plan before they can ask for signatures. So right now we've got confined space entry and working at heights. Again, you could customize this to select any of the permit types that you might have in your company. Next option, atmospheric testing. So in circumstances where your permit is requiring that someone complete an atmospheric test to make sure that there's no or hazardous atmospheric circumstances, here you're able to set what those limits are. So we can edit these and basically set the various values for lower explosive limit, minimum and maximum oxygen, parts per million of carbon monoxide, H2S. We can set the values where when someone enters a test, if it exceeds any of these parameters, it's not going to let the person proceed with the permit. Additionally, what we allow you to set is your atmospheric test validity. And so basically what this means is this is how long a test is good for before another test needs to be added. So if you don't have a limit here, the tests are good forever. Otherwise, we could have it set to 1 hour, etc. So those are your options for atmospheric testing. So that's some of our big ones on general work permit settings. Here, we have what we refer to as general work permit questions. So as we'll see when we move forward here, we have all these different permit types. And for each of these permit types, so if we go to, let's say hot work, it's an easy example, you can see that we have a number of requirements associated with hot work. What these general work permit questions are a place where you can enter permit requirements that apply to every single permit type. And the reason that these are helpful is it allows you to avoid duplication by having certain requirements that appear in each of your different permit type questions. So here, we can see the various questions that have been added. We can select and deselect the ones that we want to appear. And we can at any point add more requirements. Additionally, if we were to go into this one, so any slipping or tripping hazards at the worksite have been removed or highlighted. If we go to edit, you can see that we can indicate if this is mandatory or not. If you indicate that it's not mandatory, what that means is that when somebody's completing this work permit, if they don't select this option, they'll still be allowed to proceed. If we do select it as mandatory, it's going to force people to say that any slipping or tripping hazards have been highlighted or removed before they can even sign their permit. So it's a way to have a little bit more assurance where you need it. So that's it for our company questions. Great way to reduce duplication and keep things more straightforward. So that brings us again to our various permit types. So here, the first thing I'll show you is that you can see on this case, we have a ton of different types of work permits. If I wanted to, I could make certain of these types no longer active. I could save this, and now those types that I just removed aren't available to our employees, but are still saved if we want to kind of use them or work on them in the future. So let's make hot work available again. We'll save this. And that's how we manage our various types. If we wanted to add a new type, I could do that here. I could say, baking cake permit for baking cakes. So we can create a new permit type. And now we're able to set all of our parameters for that type here. So if we go back, we can see that baking cake is here. It actually doesn't allow us to enable that permit type because I didn't add any requirements. So let's talk a little bit about those requirements now. And I'll use hot work as an example. So if we go into the edit view for each permit type, you can see that we were able to give it a title. We're able to just provide a description. And what we would encourage as a description is what are the circumstances where somebody is required to use this permit type. So let's work a little bit down here as far as our settings. So personnel requirements, basically this is where you're able to indicate if a standby person is required. So this could either be a safety standby for maybe a confined space or working at heights. Could also be a fire watch for a hot work permit. So you're able to set a number of people who are required to be added to that permit. And the permit won't be able to proceed unless somebody's been clearly indicated as a standby person. Additionally, rescue people. So again, maybe for a working at heights or confined space permit, you require a rescue team of 2 or 3 people on your permits. So here we're able to set that you need a rescue team of 2 people. And when somebody's creating a permit, they'll be forced to select those 2 people before they can proceed. I won't add that for hot work, but that's an option. I'm just going to scroll down here and show a couple of the other ones. So atmospheric testing. If we do require someone to log that the atmosphere has been tested and is safe to proceed, we can simply toggle this, and that'll require that from them before they, again, can sign the permit. And the atmospheric test that they log will need to meet the requirements that we set earlier. So let's talk a little bit about custom signatories. So custom signatories are a way for you to override the default signatories that we showed you earlier. So those default signatories by default apply to all permits. But in some cases, for specialized hazardous work or things like that, it might be that only one person should be allowed to supervise that permit, or only one person should be allowed to issue that permit. And so here, what you're able to do is basically set one role to supervise this, or even 2 roles. And only people who meet those requirements will be able to sign these permits, and nobody else, regardless of what your defaults say. So it allows you to have a little bit more sort of permit-specific customization to say, hey, when we're doing an electrical permit, only our electrical superintendent can issue that permit, as an example. So that's one of our options here. Again, I'm just going to remove these to remove any confusion. So these are some of those top-level settings for each permit type. The last piece here is kind of our various company or questions. So again, this is very similar to the way we manage those general questions that apply to all permits, but this is specific to each type. So what you're able to do is basically curate a list of the various requirements that you expect to be met before this particular hazardous work proceeds. In general, we would encourage people to think about it in that way and get away from the not applicable kind of way of thinking that some permits are written. So here, again, we would encourage you to set a baseline of conditions that everyone should meet no matter what if you're going to proceed with this work that we know is hazardous, and that's why we're creating a work permit. If you do have some fields that, again, are not going to be applicable in every case, but you want to capture as additional information, what you're able to do, and again, if we click on this little info button and edit, is indicate that is not a mandatory field. So in this case, maybe, shielding or welding blankets, it's not going to be applicable in every single case. So we're not going to make that a mandatory question, but if they've been installed, we want to be able to capture that information. So we've set that as an optional question on this work permit. That's kind of it as far as our work permit settings and overall sort of health and safety administrative settings, with the exception of the management of our activities, hazards, and controls database. I'm going to cover that in a separate video. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you very much.